Part 1: The Secret in the Storm. Who could have imagined that in a rundown trailer on the edge of a forgotten little town, where the rain pounded the tin roof like it was trying to tear the silence apart, a secret so horrifying could be hiding? It was a night black as coal, the kind where lightning flashes were the only thing cutting through the darkness, casting jagged shadows across the figure of a young girl, Emily, just 19, her wide eyes once full of innocence now brimming with terror. She stood at the doorstep, clutching a tattered duffel bag, rain soaking her thin jacket, her hair plastered to her pale face. She had no idea that, at that very moment, her fate was being weighed by the one person she'd always called family, her own father. Emily grew up in a home that was anything but warm. Her mom died when she was little, leaving her with Tom, her dad, a man consumed by whiskey and gambling debts. He wasn't the kind of father you'd find in fairy tales. He was a shadow that haunted her childhood. The beatings, the slurred curses, the nights he'd pass out in the yard, they were all burned into her memory. Still, Emily clung to a fragile hope that, deep down, he was her dad, her only tie to something like a family. She was wrong, and that mistake would cut deeper than she could have ever imagined. That night, Emily heard whispers filtering through the thin walls of the trailer. Tom's voice, rough and shaky, carried a strange edge, like he was hiding something big. "Don't worry, she's a good kid, young, strong. You give me the cash, and she's yours." Emily froze outside the door, her heart hammering in her chest, barely believing what she'd heard. She peeked through a crack in the wood, and what she saw stopped her cold. A stranger, maybe 40, with a sly, crooked grin, sat across from her dad. On the table between them was a fat stack of bills, next to a half-empty bottle of cheap bourbon. Tom smirked, his trembling hands counting the money like it was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. Emily's legs nearly gave out. She wanted to scream, to burst in and demand answers, but her throat locked up tight. The stranger stood, clapped Tom on the shoulder, and said in a low growl, "All right, I'll be back tomorrow to pick her up. Get her ready, don't let her slip away." Tom nodded, his eyes glinting with greed, no hesitation, no guilt. Emily stumbled back, tears mixing with the rain, clutching her bag as she bolted into the night. She didn't know where she was going, just that she had to get away from the place she'd once called home. But she couldn't have known that this was only the beginning of her nightmare. As she reached the edge of the dirt road, lightning streaking the sky, she heard heavy footsteps behind her. Someone was coming after her, and deep in her gut, she knew Tom wasn't about to let her go that easily. The rain kept falling, relentless, like it was mourning the cruel twist of fate that had just begun to unfold. Part 2: The Trap Tightens. Emily ran until her lungs burned and her legs screamed for mercy, her sneakers sinking into the muddy ground. She collapsed under an old oak tree at the town's outskirts, a spot where she'd once sat as a kid, dreaming of a life beyond this nowhere place. Now, it was just a temporary shield against the storm tearing through her world. The rain drowned out everything else, but she could still hear those footsteps closing in. She turned, and there, lit by a flash of lightning, was Tom, his hulking silhouette unmistakable, his bloodshot eyes blazing with fury. "You little brat. You think you can just run?" Tom roared, his voice cutting through the downpour. He lunged, his bony hand clamping around her wrist, yanking her down into the mud. Emily thrashed, screaming into the void, but what chance did a 19-year-old girl have against a man, even one half ruined by liquor? He slapped her hard across the face, sending her sprawling. "I own you, you hear me? You don't get to defy me," he snarled, dragging her back toward the trailer like she was nothing more than livestock. On that brutal walk back, Emily stopped crying. Her tears were spent, replaced by a hollow ache that swallowed her whole. She thought of her mom, of the fleeting days when she'd felt loved before cancer took her away. Would things have been different if she were still here? No one answered, just the rain, tapping out a grim rhythm to her despair. Back at the trailer, Tom shoved her into a cramped storage room and locked the door. He stood outside, panting, his voice seeping through the cracks. "Tomorrow, you're going with him. Don't blame me, I've got to survive somehow. You're my daughter, you're supposed to sacrifice for me." Emily curled up in the corner, hugging her knees, silent. He didn't want a response, he wanted cash, and she was just the ticket to get it. The night crawled by, each tick of the rusty wall clock slicing into her soul. She rummaged through the room, desperate for anything to free herself. Then, beneath a rotted floorboard, she found it, a small kitchen knife, the one her mom used to peel apples years ago. Emily gripped it tight, the cold steel pressing into her palm, whispering that this was her last shot at breaking free. Morning came and the stranger returned. He swaggered in, flashing a greasy smile when he saw Emily tied up in the corner. "Nice work, Tom. You're a man of your word," he said, tossing another stack of bills onto the table. Tom laughed, counting the money with a feverish glee, oblivious to the icy glare Emily fixed on him. The stranger stepped toward her, reaching out to grab her arm, but in that instant, she surged to her feet. The knife gleamed in her hand, her eyes blazing with a fire no one had ever seen in her before. Part 3: The Breaking Point. The second the stranger's hand stretched toward her, time seemed to freeze. Emily wasn't that scared little girl anymore. With every ounce of strength left, she drove the knife into his shoulder. He held, crashing to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Tom stood there, stunned, the money slipping from his hands, his jaw slack as he stared at the daughter he'd sold like a piece of meat. You dare!" Tom bellowed, charging at her, but Emily was faster. She spun, slashing the air with the knife, not hitting him, but enough to make him stumble back, collapsing in a heap. She stood over him, breathing hard, her hair wild, blood staining her hands, not hers, but the blood of the man who'd tried to steal her life. "You're not my father. You're a monster," she screamed, her voice trembling but fierce. The stranger clutched his shoulder, scrambling toward the door, leaving Tom to face Emily's wrath alone. She stepped closer, the knife still raised, her gaze unflinching. Tom's bravado crumbled, he babbled, pleading, "Emily, don't do this. I'm your dad. I just wanted us to make it," but those words were ash to her now. She didn't kill him, not because she couldn't, but because she realized letting him live with his fear and guilt was a fate worse than death. Emily walked out, leaving Tom crumpled in the trailer, surrounded by the worthless cash he'd traded her for. The rain had stopped, but the sky hung heavy and gray, mirroring the storm in her heart. She didn't know where she'd go, only that she'd never look back. As for Tom, folks in town say he lost his mind after that, screaming her name in the dead of night, haunted by the daughter he'd betrayed until his last breath. Emily's story doesn't end with a fairy tale glow, but it's a wake-up call for anyone listening. Sometimes, the people closest to you can be the most dangerous, and greed can turn a man into a beast. Emily paid with her youth, Tom paid with his soul. What do you think, worth it, for a few crumpled bills?